Okay, talk about the Phillips curve, and I think I may have already posted something about this, but I don't care. I'm going to post it again because we really didn't understand it in class today. So, the Phillips curve is the inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment in the short run. Okay, and essentially we have three different points here. This is our equilibrium point, where we would have a typical rate of inflation of about 3% and our natural rate of unemployment or full employment at 5%, and that's going to be our equilibrium. Okay. Well, if there's an increase in aggregate demand, that'll create expansion, lead to lower unemployment but higher inflation, and that'll put us over here in a period of expansion. If there is a decrease in consumption, decrease in government spending, decrease in net exports, et cetera, aggregate demand decreases and pushes us into a recession where we have higher unemployment and less inflation. And this is the short run Phillips curve, SRPC here. Okay. This doesn't always happen at a perfect diagonal, okay, but it gets you the general idea. And it is possible to have inflation go into negative territory like in the Depression. So you could have a point way out here below the axis. That doesn't come into play for our general lesson though. Remember that demand shifting causes us to move along the diagonal here. But what if inflation and unemployment both increase? Okay, the worst of both worlds. A decrease in aggregate supply or stagflation. I end up with stagflation roller coaster. So a decrease in aggregate supply due to higher costs, natural disasters, too much government regulation, and we end up in Jimmy Carterville over here. Okay, so this is stagflation. There's going to be a shift of the entire short-run Phillips curve. Be aware that this is, even though we're moving away from the origin, okay, that this is bad, right? This is the opposite of the ASAD graph where moving right is good. Here, moving right is bad, okay? So what we want is an increase in aggregate supply through less regulation, more technology, etc. And an increase in aggregate supply is going to shift us this way into happy Ronald Reagan land over here, where we have low inflation, low unemployment. Okay. All right, so if we have an aggregate demand shift, we move diagonally, okay? And if aggregate supply shifts, the entire Phillips curve will shift, okay? And there is also, I did not put a ton of emphasis on this, there's also the long run Phillips curve, okay? Our LRPC, and essentially that means that no matter what, okay, just like in long run aggregate supply, we end up back at the long run Phillips curve. Okay, and that is at the natural rate of unemployment. So we have cyclical unemployment if we're over here, because we're in a recession. Okay, note here, we're kind of in, 2 or 3% level of unemployment. We're in better than the full employment level. Okay. So let's just go through some examples. Let's say we're starting here, and I give you an event, and I say there is increase in consumer confidence. Okay, consumers start spending more, consumption increases, and we're here. What's going to happen? Well, there's an increase in aggregate demand. We're going to move up and to the left to expansion. Okay. Let's say that I had the dollar get stronger. Well, if the dollar gets stronger, that is going to have a negative impact on net exports. We're gonna have a decrease in aggregate demand, and we're gonna move into a recession, down and to the right. Okay. All right. Let's say that I had an increase in oil costs for firms. Well, that's going to cause stagflation. That's going to result in a shifting of the Phillips curve up and to the right. Okay. For our purposes, don't worry about where the point is when we shift. Just understand that the whole curve shifts. And let's say there's a improvements in technology, communication, and transportation. Well, that's going to cause aggregate supply to increase. Okay, so make sure you understand not only which way the curve shifts, but then applying them to the Phillips curve. Okay, you know that the long run Phillips curve is always at the natural rate of unemployment, which for our purpose is going to be 5%. Okay, Phillips curve, named after Phillips.